Recording. All right, hi once again for those who've arrived in the last couple of minutes. My name is Catherine. I am a librarian at South San Francisco Public Library, and today we'll be talking about video editing using OpenShot. So, housekeeping items. This session is being recorded, as you probably heard a moment ago. The recording will be sent out via email within a few days. I do edit these manually, generally using OpenShot, so if there's any complexity to that, it can take me a moment. You can ask questions at any time via Q&A or chat. If you would like to chat with your fellow attendees, please change your chat setting to all panelists and attendees. Otherwise, I will be the only one who sees it. The slideshow will be followed by a demonstration of what you can do in OpenShot, and there will be time for questions on voice at the end if you would prefer that over asking them in text, excuse me. So first off, what is OpenShot? Well, it's one of the many options of video editing programs. It is available for Windows, Mac, Linux, and Chrome OS, although that last one comes with a bit of a caveat that some Chromebooks may not be able to run it. It is free and open source, which is one of the reasons I'm featuring it. I believe there's another video editing program that one of my colleagues will be talking about in a few weeks. So if you want a different option, feel free to view that session as well. OpenShot supports a wide variety of image, video, and audio formats. It does have pre-made effects, transitions, and titles that you can use. So can your computer run this? If you have a computer that runs a recent version of Windows, Mac OS, or Linux, it can most likely run this as long as it runs that operating system reasonably well. If your computer just constantly feels really slow, I wouldn't really recommend getting into heavy-duty video editing with that, because video editing is unfortunately just inherently something that takes a certain amount of computer power to do smoothly. You'll see today what it looks like on a several years old sort of mid-range computer, which is what I'm using right now. But if you have, a really recent computer or one that's more intended for video editing, of course, you will see better performance. Now, some Chromebooks can run it, but again, there's some caveats to that. So specifically, the system requirements are as follows on this screen, but most of these requirements, again, if your computer shipped with Windows 7, 8, 10, or Chrome OS, well, not necessarily with Chrome OS, but Windows 7, 8, or 10, or a recent version of OS 10, it is probable that that your computer would be able to run this program. You will get the slides later as well, so you can review these in greater detail. I believe your reminder email should also have included a link to the user guide, which is where I took this information from, the official user guide. Now, why should you use OpenShot? Well, I'm not going to say it's the best video editing program for every single use case. With that said, it's sort of a mid-range one in terms of complexity and difficulty. In other words, if all you want to do is, let's say you've taken a cute video of your dog and you want to post that to Facebook, but you've realized that in the first few seconds, you have your thumb on top of the camera. Well, you don't need OpenShot just to remove those first few seconds. You can use something like Windows Movie Maker or QuickTime, which, depending on your operating system, you might already have. It is, however, better than those programs if you want to do a lot of small, precise edits if you want to overlay transparent images or titles on top of your image, if you need to support a wider variety of formats for import or export. It does have less features than some of the paid options, though, like Adobe Premiere or Final Cut Pro, which are professional grade programs. However, I think most people don't need those professional grade programs, and those are hundreds of dollars or a relatively hefty subscription fee, depending on whether you buy it upfront or as a subscription. So worth considering the free options before you start looking into the paid ones, in my opinion. What you can do, though, is you can edit photos, video, and audio into a movie with background music, with a custom title screen, with fades, with effects. So for your basic video editing projects, it's a pretty solid option. I've inserted here a few screens from the official tutorial. You can see that this person is importing content by highlighting the files in their file browser. This is a Linux file browser, so most likely your file browser will look different. But they're highlighting the files and then they're dragging and dropping them into the program, and then the files get imported. And then they're dragging and dropping those files onto the tracks at the bottom here. And that puts them into the video where they overlap the little blue segments. That's going to automatically be a fade, but you can use a different style of transition if you prefer. And additionally, it shows that you can see multiple tracks. So you can have a track for video or photos, and then you can have a track for audio or multiple audio tracks even. And this is also how you would overlay transparent images on top of your video. Do we have any questions before we move along to the demo? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions as of yet, but you can always ask me later. I imagine it'll become a little bit more clear as we move along. Oh, there was one more slide. So it also shows the export options. There are a lot of options, but including presets for, let's say, if you want to upload to YouTube, something like that. But that's something a little bit complex that I'm not going to get into all of the detail there, unless people have specific questions. Okay. And with that, I'm going to minimize this not Internet Explorer, Edge screen, and you should be able to see OpenShot now. So when you first open OpenShot, it by default will have a tutorial visible for you that will give you pointers to certain aspects of the interface. You can deactivate this if you prefer, but I'll go through some of the aspects myself because I, of course, have opened this before, so it's not showing me the automatic tutorial. And I'm running this on Windows, so your interface will look slightly different if you have the Mac, Chrome OS, or Linux versions. All right, so at the top, we have the menus, the File, Edit, Title, View, and Help menus. They do have a tutorial. If you open that, it'll go to your web browser and the tutorial that I linked, I believe. There's also a number of buttons at the top. You can create a new project, open an existing project, save your current project, undo or redo steps, import files with this plus sign, choose a profile. I believe that's, yeah, that's how much, what resolution do you want? What frame rate do you want, essentially? Do you want interlacing or do you not want interlacing? Now, interlacing you probably don't want, but I will define it really quickly. Essentially on CRT, that's cathode ray tube style screens, they draw the lines alternatingly. So if you imagine from the top of the screen, the horizontal lines that make up the picture, there's one line that it draws and one line that it doesn't draw yet. and so on and so forth down the whole screen. And in that way, even though it's only able to draw at a certain speed, it can appear to have a higher frame rate. In other words, things look less blurry or less jerky, rather, because you're able to display partial images repeatedly. Now, modern like LCD screens and plasma TVs and so forth don't do this. So for modern usage, you probably don't want that. But anyway, it has a lot of options. I'm just going to stick with the one that it gave me by default, which is a 720p, which is a reasonably high resolution, but it's smaller than the resolution of my screen, and 30 frames per second. And then it gives me some more detail at the bottom here. I'll close that. If you do know what frame rate that you want to use for the exported content, it's good to have your project the whole time in that frame rate. That'll give you results that are much closer to the final result when you're previewing it. So if you're, say you're uploading to a particular platform, to Facebook, to YouTube, to Instagram, etc., it's good to do a little research into what the frame rate is that they like there and what the resolution and so forth. But with that aside, the default option should be pretty usable for most purposes. Okay, so the next thing we have is this big dark gray box on the left here. That's where all of your content is going to go. And I'll just start importing that right now. I have this folder here that I made with all of my videos. So I'm going to grab one. I just click it and then I hold down and drag it and drop it in the window. And after a moment, it imports. The other way to import things is you can hit this import files button, but it's nice to just be able to do this more visually. I'm going to now click on one of my files, and I'm going to hold down Shift and highlight all the way to this credits.png, and that allows me to, so if you click something and then you hold down Shift and click another thing, it'll highlight everything in between. I'm going to hit Control and click another thing, and that'll highlight that as well. So then I drag those all 6 items and drop them in, and it takes a moment to import that many files. Okay, but now we have a couple of images. We have various video files. You can tell because they have this little film strip appearance. You can also sort them by type, so video, audio, image, or you can filter them, so that's a search by name. I'll go back to show all. Below this, you can see that there's some tabs for project files, transitions, and effects. These will be the pre-made effects that come with the program. So transition for transitioning between 2 videos. My personal philosophy is to go relatively sparing with these. You can use them cleverly, but if you use some of the more complex ones too frequently, it starts to look a little busy, in my opinion. But that's a philosophy thing. You can do a different style in your own videos. And then we have effects here like blur or various color related effects. You can do a negative, etc. On the right, we have this video preview window. Now, of some note is that when I go over this middle part, I can see there's a little side-to-side arrow, so I can actually adjust the size of these elements, I believe. Yes, there we go. So I can make the video preview bigger, which is convenient. And below the video preview, it has some pretty standard video controls. It has a play button, which will turn into a pause button if I hit play. Jump to start, jump to end, and then rewind and fast forward. Below that, we have the timeline, which is going to be sort of the meat of what we're doing, and which has a few different tracks in it. So by default, you have 5 tracks. Again, these can be used for video or audio or images. And you want if you want to layer something transparent on top of something opaque, you want to put that in the top track. For audio tracks, it doesn't matter as much. The other thing is above the timeline, it has options for adding an additional track, snapping enabled, so that'll go to like the ends of clips and things like that. The razor tool, which is for making cuts. Add marker, so you can have like, okay, after this marker, the sound fades out, things like that. Jumping to the previous or to the next marker, you can center the timeline on the playhead. Now the playhead is this little guy, this blue thing that shows you where you are in the video. And then you can zoom in and out with this bar here. So there I zoomed out and then I zoomed way in. I'll put it a little bit more moderately in the middle there. The other thing you can do once you've imported your videos is you can actually right click them and split them right from the sort of project files menu here. So I'm going to right click this and click split clip. And this is that case I was talking about. Oh, your fingers are in front of the video. And I actually did this intentionally so that I could demonstrate this. And if I play this, you may be able to hear there's a little bit of audio as well, because I was filming this in the library when it was empty, but there were still, you know, I had coworkers who were talking in the background a little bit. So I can navigate through this clip by dragging the little square. And I'll drag it to just after my fingers disappear. There we go. I'll make that the start. And then I'll drag all the way to the end and make that the end. And optionally, you can rename the clip. And I'm not going to bother that actually, but I'll just hit create. And that'll go to the end of my project file. So now I have this new clip to work with. Now, once you have a clip that you like, you can drag it to the timeline. And I am going to put it on one of the lower tracks, as I mentioned earlier. I'll put it on track 3. And then it appears in the preview window like that. And the playback might seem a little bit jerky. That's because my computer is not very powerful. I will full screen this at this point though, so you can see things a little bit larger. One thing I like to do with these clips, because again, there is a little bit of sound to them, such as when I pick up and put down the books, I can right click it and I have the option to either separate out the audio. Let's say if I wanted to conserve it, but I wanted to edit it separately, or I can control the volume. And so I go to entire clip, I set that to 0%, and then you won't hear the audio at all. And then for adding those title screens that I pre-made, I can drag this image down to one of the higher numbered lines and it layers on top. I'll demonstrate that it doesn't show up if you put it on a lower level as well. So you can't see it because it's completely covered by this video that is entirely opaque. But if I put it on the top level, you can see it. Now, I made these in Canva. Alternately, you can use something like Inkscape. You can use GNU image manipulation program. I will put those in the chat actually, because I don't have anything written with those. Options for making transparent images. You can, of course, use something like Photoshop, but obviously that costs money. Although something like Photoshop and Adobe Premiere and so forth, those are better options if you are a student because they do have student rates on them. Okay, and the image type that I'm using is a PNG, which does allow you to have a transparent background. Some image formats do not. I will also add the audio track here, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it once I preview it. Well, I'm not hearing that, so that's interesting. if I go back to the beginning. Oh, well, we'll just have to deal with that. I did set my audio options. Maybe my audio is just too low. I don't know. In any case, so you can add an audio track like that, and it should play. Try moving that around. In any case, the audio here is, you saw the credits image, and let me just preview the file here. It's a stock audio from this bensound.com. Now you can get audio wherever, but if you are, as I'm planning to do, going to post your video online, then it's good to use something that you have the rights to use. Either you're convinced that it is fair use, because under certain circumstances, you may be able to use something that you didn't specifically get permission for, or better yet, that you have permission. So if I add another video, and I'm actually going to move this one back because I wanted to put the going into the library bit first. If you add another video and you overlap them, then they will produce a fade. Now this playing back fades tends to stutter quite badly on my computer, but let's see if we can see it nonetheless. Okay, and play. You should gradually see the other video coming behind it. And you can adjust that as well. There we go. And if you remove the original fade and put a new one, you can adjust the length of it. Another thing you can do, just delete that and add a more custom option. So if I go in and play that, we should see a wipe instead of a fade, hopefully. Yeah, I did a wipe. So there you go. That's how you use transitions. Let's try out some effects. I'm going to put this negative effect on, and it automatically applies to the whole video that you have. And you can see it's done a negative on that. Now, let's say you don't want the effect. You're going, well, that looks really odd having all the colors negative like that. There's actually, it puts a little letter or symbol indicating the presence of a visual effect. You can click that, right click it actually, and adjust the properties, which opens up this whole extra menu, or remove effect. And I can get out of this view by going to view and then simple view, and it closes that side window that opened up. Any questions so far? No, okay. Well, in any case, let's see. We do have one in Q&A. Can you import YouTube video? Not directly. You would have to download it. If you want to import video from YouTube, you would have to download it, which is going to require a third-party tool. That is to say, there are websites that permit to download YouTube videos. However, in general, those tools are not sanctioned by YouTube. And just because you're able to acquire the video, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have the right to use it. So it would be good to look at the content creator and see, you know, what their terms of usage are, if any. With that said, in terms of producing videos for personal use, while you may not technically be within your rights to do that, it's unlikely that the rights holder would actually go after you. It's more when you start sharing it, such as posting it on the internet, that it would be a concern. So I wouldn't necessarily advise importing YouTube video unless you know that you have permission or you're convinced that your usage is fair use. Which is a whole legal question that I can't help you too much with, except to point you towards resources of what constitutes fair use. It's a very case-by-case thing. I hope that answers your question. Another thing you'll want to do, of course, is save your project as you go. Editing a video, if you want to do any significant number of changes, will take several times the length of the actual video. So you can, you know, I know some of the people who do content for YouTube, they spend hours editing a 15-minute video, right? So you will want to save frequently. So that's in the File menu, and then Save Project or Save Project As. When you want to export projects, you can either hit this Export Video button in this top bar here, or you can go to File, Export. And you can export it as various types of files that you can then import into other video editing software, or you can export an actual video. So I've clicked that option and it opens this up with all these export options. And once again, it's good to have it in have video in particularly the frame rate that you want for the final project. But there are some profiles that they have as examples. So let's say if I want a web export, then it gives me suggestions for Flickr, Instagram, Metacafe, Picasa, Twitter, Wikipedia, YouTube, etc. There's Blu-ray export, let's see, various device types, depending on the usage that you want. Remembering, of course, that if you export in a higher resolution, it will make the final video bigger, as well as if you select a high quality option, it will also make the final video bigger and may or may not take more time exporting. Now you can expect for this video, well, I haven't finished it obviously, but for the video that I demoed, it's about 2.5 minutes long and it took me, I think, about 8 minutes to export. So it does take several times the length of the video. This might not be true if you have a very fast computer, but as we previously mentioned, I do not. Yeah, the one last thing I wanted to cover is that you can add titles using, so I'm going to actually delete the title that I pre-made from the timeline. You can add titles using the internal tools of this program. So perhaps you don't want to go to the trouble, or you don't feel that you can achieve a better result by going to the trouble of creating a title elsewhere. And it has a bunch of pre-made options. Including, for example, it has these, motion picture association style options. It has various other styles. It's a little bit slow here. And then on the right here, you can see there's a bunch of different things that you can change. So let's say new books at the library, for example. It's going to create this as an image file when you're done with it. You say new. Hello, it's being a little bit sluggish. There we go. New books. And this only has one line of text. Some of them have a little bit more customization. But I can change the font, and so that it opens up this font select option, and there's a little sample in the corner there. So let's say I wanted to try this Birch. or system font, symbol, this game keys font, etc. Let's say I pick that one, I hit OK, and then the result should be reflected here after a moment. You can change the text color as well. Although here it's doing some interesting effects with the text, so I'm not sure how that'll work. And you can change the background color. If I hit save, it'll make me an image. And then I can plop this down here and we'll see if it does have a transparent background or not. Drag the video head over here. And it's taking a moment to actually display it. There we go. It's a transparent background. It says new books. It's overlaid onto our video. And you can see the video still moves behind it. You can also, let me open that back up again. You can also go into the advanced editor, which requires installing Inkscape, which I had previously mentioned is an image editing program, or really it's a program for making vector images, which I had previously covered in a Tech Tuesday class. They also have, I'm going to cancel that. They also have some animated title options, but those do require Blender, which I will put the name in the chat as well. Now, Blender is a 3D modeling and animation program, which is free, but it does have a significant learning curve, so it may or may not be the best option for, if you're not feeling like spending a lot of time learning new software. So I'm going to hit cancel on that. And with that, I think I have covered everything that I meant to cover. So I will stop recording and open it up to questions on chat. Thank you for coming.